So I'm going to talk about how I came to use Glowroot in the Liferay context. It all started a few years ago, 4 years ago, I think. I was assigned a customer case where we had re-indexing, which was taking like 4 days. Full re-indexing 4 days, so it made it very difficult to operate the website. So first things we did, we enabled some logs in order to understand what was taking time. We discovered that we were spending quite a lot of time re-indexing the documents, and then I needed a plan to go forward. I needed to understand what was going on when we were re-indexing those documents, and this is what brought me to use Glowroot, because everybody had an opinion about why it was taking time, and the important thing, yes. So what matters is to get some data, to measure what is happening in the application. So the plan was to stop guessing when facing those performance issues, but actually get some data from the runtime. So when we're dealing with performance issues, I've seen a lot of different performance issues being described to me by customers. So it could be many things. It could be perceived performance issues. It could be performance issues measured by load testing tools. It could be the application crashing because of memory not being available or whatever. So there are a lot of causes for performance issues, and the best way to figure out what is actually happening is to, put the tools and find out where the issue is. So when we look at what it could be, you've got Liferay on the right. Liferay itself has some dependencies. It relies on a document library, so file access. It relies on a database, on Elasticsearch. It could rely on backend APIs. So if you've been working on projects with financial institution or that kind of things, they have web services being exposed. It could be some very expensive calls you make to business domain services when you're hitting a mainframe, for example. So it could be many things which make Liferay slow. But maybe it's not even Liferay which is slow. It could be something in front of it. So you've got Nginx, a WAF maybe in front of it. Maybe you can get some improvements through the usage of a CDN. What things you have to monitor is sometimes the marketing team is using Google Tag Manager, is putting something on the page which makes everything slower. Because yes, what could happen is the application is slow, but on the browser side actually, this happens from time to time. So it's important to detect where the performance issue actually is. So it could be mobile apps calling Liferay APIs. There could be a performance bottleneck in the API calls. JMeter, I put it in bold here because there have been a couple of situations where I've been requested to have a look, because there was with very high load, JMeter was breaking, and actually it could be on the client side, JMeter itself, or the network in between. And a few stories we had. Sometimes it's difficult. Maybe you've attended the call with Scholt yesterday. Sometimes it's difficult to differentiate evil hackers from search bots which visit the site. So most of the time it's not lupus. It's a little bit like if you've seen House a few years earlier, a lot of people have an idea what's going on. And we make a lot of theories. One thing I'd like to show you is this, before going to Glowroot, is especially because we are moving to client extensions. When you make a profiling of your application on the browser side, look at this. Look at how much time you're spending in scripts. And here, in the beginning, it was a bit counterintuitive. I was thinking, we can cache the JavaScript. But even if you cache the JavaScript, it takes some time for the browser to actually parse and interpret that JavaScript. So there are situations like this where the browser is spending like almost 2 seconds reading through the JavaScript, even if it is cached. Downloading the script is very fast, so caching sometimes doesn't help that much. What helps in Liferay is, if you're familiar with the single-page application architecture, when you move from one page to the next, it doesn't reload everything. So here, this is where this framework is shining a little bit, because if you don't need to reload all the JavaScript every time you move from one page to the other, this is something you're saving. So this is just something I wanted to mention before we go on the server side with Glowroot. So Glowroot, what is it? When you run Glowroot, you've got something like this on your screen. So it's a cheap alternative to tools you've been using maybe already, like Dynatrace, New Relic, etc. Just try to see how many of you have already used Glowroot in a Liferay context. Okay, maybe half of the audience. So for the ones who have never used it, so it's open source, customizable, we'll look into it. It runs on premises as well. So that's one interesting thing. All the professional tools, enterprise solutions, they are sending data to the cloud. Glowroot makes it possible to keep the data you collect on the server, on premises. It can remain here. It's very easy to use compared to some of the other tools. It has a low overhead, so it doesn't cost you that much on the server. And you can get it started in 10 minutes. Though, it only manages what happens in the JVM. So as opposed to all the other tools which cover a lot of different technologies, also the browser side, etc., Glowroot is only focusing on what happens on the JVM. But it gives you also some idea about what's happening on the dependencies. And this is quite helpful. So setting up Glowroot, we made it easy in recent, well, not that recent versions, like 1 year ago already. So all you have to do is set this environment variable, Glowroot enable equals true. If you're on the Windows, you will have to do a little bit more, but you can look at the details in the blog article over there. So Glowroot, we were talking about Java just earlier. We've stuck with Glowroot 13.6 because it was the last one supporting JDK 8. And we will have to move further to the newest ones in order to properly handle JDK 21. Okay? So all it needs for you in your local workspace is set this environment variable. Here you go, it's running. So first, let me get to know the UI. On the top, you've got transaction types. By default, it shows you web transactions, so all the inbound HTTP requests you receive. On the left, you've got a facet, which shows you which have been the most expensive transactions in that category. So there are a few words you will have to remember. Transaction is one of them. And then you've got timers. That's the second one. 3 important ones you will have. So timers tell you a little bit about what is happening in that transaction. So you've got a text description of those timers. So you've got things like HTTP client requests, JDBC queries, so things which happen in the processing of the transaction. And you've got here a graphical view where every color is matching one of the most important timers which has been identified in those transactions. Then it's also possible to access data about individual slow transactions. For every slow transactions, you will have access to the same information. The timers, and you can see how they are nested, because sometimes Glowroot is going to start a timer within another timer. And you can access to more details on the bottom. You can access trace entries, which are here. Trace entries are more details about operations, individual operations happening within the transaction. And Glowroot comes with a lot of built-in trace entries, but you can also create your own trace entries and put some details about what's happening. So if you're monitoring a SQL query, you can be interested in what the SQL query is, how many records it returned, for example. When you're making an outbound HTTP call to a service, you could put the URL. You could put, I don't know, how many bytes you got back. This is a kind of detail you can put in a trace entry. So let's put everything here together. So we've got transaction types, transactions, and within every transaction, we can capture timers, trace entries. And all those things, transactions, trace entries, timers, they are instrumentations. Instrumentations on Java methods, okay? So every Java method you can run in the JVM, you can build an instrumentation on top of it. And you need to understand what transaction, trace entry, and timer means, because this is the kind of instrumentation you're going to make. Timer is the least expensive instrumentation you can make. It's only counting how many times you're calling the method and how much time you spend inside. Trace entry, they will show up within slow transactions. They capture a little bit more details. They will take more processing, a little bit more overhead, and they will use a little bit more memory in the database at the end of the day. And transactions, they capture a lot of metadata. They also have relationships with the area, and they will take more memory in your database. So you have to determine, is it worth instrumenting a transaction, or is a timer enough? Now, you've got some built-in plugins in Glowroot. For example, JDBC plugin, Servlet plugin, Elasticsearch plugin. So some things are already here. Also, there is a Quartz plugin, which is already there. So if you look at scheduled jobs, it's also useful. And in addition to that, you may see that we have a Liferay template plugin as well, because we are also capable of adding our own plugins in the picture in order to monitor stuff which can be expensive on the Liferay side, like free market templates. One other thing I wanted to mention before we go further is the memory usage. From time to time, customers tell me, oh, my Java application is using a lot of memory. And it's important to distinguish what memory we are talking about. The memory the operating system is assigning to Java, or the memory Java uses inside of the JVM. And when Java, at least the former versions we've been mostly working on 8 and 11, is using memory, it's taking memory from the operating system, it's not giving it back. So here you'll be interested in what happens within the JVM. And here, what Glowroot can also help you with is access JMX metrics in order to see how the heap is being used, the meter space is being used, etc. So yeah, I'd like to make a... Hopla. Can someone help me with the HDMI cable? Ah, here it is. Oh, thank you. Someone did it in my bag. Thank you very much. So what I would like to do, if you can switch to the screen, thank you very much. I will show you around what Glowroot looks like. So first, hopla. Going here. I'm making sure I'm logged in against my Liferay. Up. Here I am, and I can hit the Glowroot homepage. So here, one thing you can see is you can access Glowroot immediately on /o/Glowroot here, you see? And you're only going to be able to access it out of the box if you're logged in as an Omni admin. So this is something we've built. We've made available Glowroot on port 8080, assuming that you're an admin, okay? So this is in order to make it easy and quickly actionable. So one thing we're going to do, for example, yesterday we were mentioning search requests, which are quite expensive, and we can have a look at it. What happens when we make a search request? So here, hitting the search request making a few calls to capture some data. And let's see what we have on the other side. Refreshing, zooming in. Here I can look at this Web University search request. What time is it? Yeah, here it is. Can zoom in. So what are we doing? So for the moment, I'm seeing we're spending some time. Servlet dispatched, doesn't tell me a lot. We've got a little bit of JDBC query. You can see details here, what kind of JDBC queries are being made. They are ordered by cost. And here, this is where I'm starting my investigations, is the thread profile. So sometimes when you deal with performance issues, you make thread dumps. What Glowroot does is it makes a lot of thread dumps for you in the background all the time for every transaction. So I'm looking at this. I can represent this information as a flame graph. So how do you read this? The width is the frequency of samples you've got. And here you can see where in the stack you've been. Color doesn't mean anything else than package name change. But here already I can see something. Oh, spending quite a lot of time, of course, in Elasticsearch. I'm calling org Elasticsearch client, REST high-level client, search. So it would be worth instrumenting that method. So have a look at the process. We already have here a transaction being captured, and I would like to add a timer. So I go over there, configuration, instrumentation, add new. So REST high-level client it was. Up, search. And here, if you remember, so you can choose between all the signatures which are available if there are many. You have the choice between capturing a transaction, a trace entry, or just a timer. I'm going to add a timer here. And I'm going to call it Elasticsearch. Hoopla, I've almost spelled it correctly. I'm adding it. For the moment, it does nothing. You go back here, and it tells you have to restart the JVM in order to apply changes, or use the apply changes without restart button. I don't use that button in production, but I use it in UAT because it's adding some bytecode instrumentation low level. It could freeze the JVM. Better not do it in production. In production, what you're going to do is you're going to get the configuration, which has been updated, copy it to your configuration production, restart your environments. That's safer. So going back here, I'm in the local environment, everything should be fine. I apply the changes, done. I'm going to make a couple of other requests now. Up. Here it is. Search, 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 search. We go back. We look at the transactions. Search. I zoom in. I zoom in the recent ones. You see here, it's a little bit purple. Elasticsearch. So now I can reliably see how much time I have spent in Elasticsearch. So here, have a look. Show all. Elasticsearch, here it is. So you can see there are in average 2.7 Elasticsearch queries here in that place per transaction, and we're spending that amount of time. And there's probably another place where we are calling Elasticsearch. Elastic. And now, up. I told you about all the metrics you can capture. Here you've got JMX. You have access to CPU usage, memory usage. And the nice thing is you can look for other data. You can go over here in the Ambient tree, and everything which is monitored with JMX, you can add it as an additional object to monitor. So here, for example, You could look for, I don't know, the sweat pool. You've got the sweat pool. Have you ever been in a war room where someone tells you, oh, we should add more sweats to the sweat pool? First check if we actually are lacking sweats. So here, what you can do is this. You copy the object name. Rup. This is something you can safely do in production here. You go to configuration. You go here to gauges. Add new. You put the name of the object, and then you can add some metrics to monitor. So here, the sweat count would be nice. Connection count, accept count, current sweat count, that one. You add it. Here you go. You go back to JVM. And now you can start monitoring the sweat pool. You can do the same with the, for example, the database pool. You can also observe what's happening in the Liferay caches. You know, you've got a lot of cache everywhere, journal article cache, etc. So you can add gauges for all of that. We can go back to the thank you very much. So yes, I was thinking maybe show you on Liferay Cloud, but I was not sure about the network connection here. So the local architecture, what does it look like? So you've got the Liferay runtime in a JVM. Glowroot is attached as an agent. And when you run it just like this, it exposes a GUI on port 4000. We magically re-expose it on port 8080, but this is what it looks like. And it persists the data in an HSQL database. So if you run it like this out of the box, it's going to put data on the disk. In a production setup, this is probably not what you're going to do. One nice thing you can do with this HSQL database, nevertheless, is if you run some tests locally or in UAT, and it is persisting the data collected in the HSQL database, you can go on the file system of your server. You can copy that data directory, you zip it, you send it over to Liferay support in a ticket, for example, and it's possible for us then to run java-jar glowroot.jar with your zipped HSQL database, and we will access all the data you have collected. So that's a nice way. So you probably have shared with us database dumps in the past. You can also share with us Glowroot profiles like this. So if you have made a load test and you've got some results like this, you can share it with us like I've done here, and we can observe your results. And this is a production setup that we're using on Liferay SaaS, for example. So you can set up Glowroot to act only as an agent which forwards the data to Cassandra. They only support Cassandra, no other database. And then you run another server which is accessing Cassandra to display the information. So that would be a production setup for Glowroot. It's quite easy to set up as well. So yes, one of the things I believe is I tend not to overthink about all the optimization I should do. I prefer to code something, have a look at how it behaves, and if I see there is a performance issue, I will try to correct it. So Glowroot can help you with that way of building software. And yeah, some tips. Optimize the critical parts. So Glowroot is helping you identify what are the most consuming transactions. So the transaction is going to be the most consuming if its response time is high and if it is called many times. If you have a transaction which is taking time but only called 3 times a day, it's okay. However, it could be a weak link in your infrastructure that you should monitor in case someone wants to bring down your infrastructure because of that weak link. You can also look at the most consuming SQL queries, like I've shown to you earlier. You can also track down excessive memory usage. For example, a SQL query running quite fast, but returning 10,000 of rows. This is going to be very expensive because Hibernate is going to load a lot of objects, maybe only in the context of an HTTP request, and we'll have to garbage collect it later. So that could be very expensive on the memory side. By the way, I talked about that reindexing problem. I remember when I looked at what Glowroot told me, it told me that in the context of that reindexing, over 1 terabyte of memory had been used during that reindexing. So it means, of course, that a lot of garbage collection has happened in order to make it possible. And also, seek correlation with system weight, CPU usage, because you could have situations like thread contention. The CPU usage remains low, but you're spending a lot of time in the threads. Blocking could be a synchronized code block, could be concurrent class loading, things like that. And also, seek if you have the database collection pool, which is full, Elasticsearch capacity, how much traffic it can handle, etc. So going back to what I've shown to you earlier, how the instrumentation works. So the instrumentation is on a method. This method is called in a main transaction. Later, this transaction may spawn other threads. It builds a thread profile. You can configure the frequency, how often it's going to be capturing thread dumps. So by default, every second, you can make it smaller if you're working on small samples. And you can create custom Glowroot plugins, and I can show you how. So if you can quickly show my screen again. Thank you very much. I will give you an example from the Liferay source code. We are monitoring templates, free market templates. So what does it look like? You can create plugins in Java for Glowroot, where first you identify a class. So here I'm interested in that free market fragment entry processor class and the process fragment entry link HTML method. Okay? Then in that class, this instrumentation, I'm going to say, you've got to run this code before, so this on before the call happens. So here you go. You've got some parameters which are bound. The request parameters you receive, for example. And you can use it to build a message. And you have the choice between timing only, or creating a trace entry, or creating a transaction. Sometimes in the arguments of the method, the parameters of the method, you will receive some Liferay-specific objects. For example, a theme display object. This object is not available at compilation time. So in that case, you will look at the code. I'm creating some shims. They're on the bottom here. So here you've got DDM template shim, fragment entry link shim. Those are interfaces I define at the Glowroot plugin level, which are like a sibling of classes which exist on the Liferay side. So you define them like this. You only have to add the methods of what you're going to need. So here, for example, if I want to get the company ID from the fragment entry link, I can define that method, and here we go. So this way, with Glowroot plugins, you can go a bit further than what I was showing earlier. With the, in the control panel, you can create an instrumentation by designating a method, etc. Here, through code, you can capture more data and create customized messages. Okay? We can go back to the slides. So the objective is to capture some information which are specific to Liferay. For example, I've been working recently on JGroups communication. I'm going to be here tomorrow. It's quite a complex topic, so we can look into it together during the unconference if you want. Reindexing, for example, Liferay import-export. This is what I've been showing to you. My advice, include Glowroot early in your development process. And one last thing, I'm very grateful of what the people in the Glowroot project have been doing, because it's a tool which has helped me learn a lot about what you can achieve with performance analysis. That's all from me today. Thank you very much. And don't hesitate to ask me questions. I would gladly help you with your performance issues.